A big part is also founder, like having a founder mentality. And
Hmm.
so if you think of yourself as the founder or the owner of a company or a brand, you are more likely to do whatever it takes to get the mission accomplished. And
Hmm.
so having a founder mentality where you take ownership for the trash getting taken out, or you take ownership for the burgers getting flipped, or whatever it is, that really sets you up for success in almost any field. All right, so I will kick it off with a softball here. Did you see that Scarlett Johansson and Disney settled out of court with their lawsuit?
No, I was actually wondering what happened with that.
So what happened was they signed a contract for Black Widow, and then COVID-19 happened and theaters got smoked. They decided to release Black Widow on Disney Plus, their streaming platform, for like a paid premiere, as well as the theatrical release. And what that meant is that no one went and saw it in theaters, basically. So
Yeah.
Scarlett Johansson and her team decided to sue Disney. Plus, it's her last movie as Black Widow. She's been doing this for 10 years, which is
Hmm.
pretty crazy when you think about it.
Yeah.
Doing so many movies as the same character. They settled out of court, and she basically said like, "Hey, you guys didn't pay me like this part of the contract." And they said, "We already paid you $20 million." And obviously that wasn't enough, so they paid her some more, and the lawsuit is over, as is their
So they settled.
relationship. They
Yeah.
settled out of court. Yes.
Yeah, because for a lot of actors, those opening box office numbers definitely get factored in when it comes to making that extra money aside from being paid for doing the acting gig. So I could see how that could definitely hurt, because if a lot of people are paying for an extra level for Disney Plus
Right.
and then they're just watching it there, well, then you can have five people over and watch on one person's premiere access versus having five people paying X amount of dollars to go in to see it in theaters.
Well, Disney Plus for the premieres, they charge you $30. So special price.
Is it like a one time, or do you have access?
Good question. I think it's like a 24-hour rental. I haven't done it.
Oh, interesting.
When's the last time you went to a movie in theaters though?
Last time was I saw Mortal Kombat when it was in theaters. When was it?
Fairly
In
recently.
April? Yeah.
Okay. Okay. So you like waited to see something you really wanted to see, right, in theaters?
Yeah, it's like the first movie theater experience I've had probably since, all the COVID stuff went down.
The last movie I saw in theaters was the Lego Movie 2, and I may never go back.
Just don't see Lego Movie 2
Right.
or Lego
Just
Movie 3. Just maybe there's something else that's more worth watching.
okay. So the next thing did you see is TikTok surpassed 1 billion monthly users.
Not a shocker.
They've only been around for 3 years. So I have some stats on TikTok. So
All
they
right.
just passed 1 billion monthly global users. It's also the favorite platform of content creators per a new study from the Influencer Marketing Factory, which sounds like a potentially made up name. But the company's most recent survey included responses from 500 people. 85% of these people said it was their full-time job. The correlation is between creators' favorite platforms and platforms where they make the most money. So, of the people they talked to, 30% of them preferred TikTok, and 24% of them said it's the platform where they make the most money.
Interesting.
So then 22% preferred Instagram, preferred Instagram, and 22% said it's the platform where they make the most money. And then same thing for YouTube. 22% preferred YouTube, and 20% said it's the platform that they make the most money. So it makes sense that if you're a content creator, you're doing this as your living, you're going to prefer the one that you have the most relevance and have the most influence and make the most financial gain.
It has about, a billion or so people using it every month.
Yeah, a lot of people helps. The scrolling algorithmic part of it was something that I kind of wanted to touch on, because AI, artificial intelligence, is such a buzz phrase right now.
Mm-hmm.
And I know neither of us spend a lot of time on TikTok. TikTok keeps appearing everywhere. So
Hmm.
I saw it this week in Beethoven. Basically, they are creating the 10th symphony based on a little bit of his writing before he died. And then artificial intelligence will write the rest. So I thought this was kind of interesting, just touching on like where we are in tech and music.
Yeah, I thought I remember hearing something a while back that there was some kind of like AI software that basically has all these different things inputted of classical pieces that have been done over the
Like helps
years.
you write. Sure.
Yeah, so you can kind of more or less put something together that sounds like it was written by those types of composers because it uses these very like theoretical algorithms or whatever is put into it. So it's like anyone can put
It's
something
like using
together.
the same rules. Yeah.
Yeah. But then it's like nothing's ever going to be really more interesting than something that basically just sounds like someone who put, you know, Mahler and Beethoven and, put all this stuff together. And it's like, okay, well, it
Sure.
sounds like something that's already been done, but it's nothing that's really going to like break the rules or take anyone's job. I don't think.
Yeah. I think a part where it would take someone's job if you're doing like stock music or library music that is very formulaic and stereotypical, it's
Hmm.
pretty easy for like artificial intelligence to replace that, I think. But with Beethoven, they are performing the work on October 9th in Bonn, Germany. And then they're going to release a recording of the symphony. So I will definitely check that out. Beethoven started work on his 10th symphony, but due to deteriorating health, wasn't able to make much headway. All he left behind were some musical sketches. And so now a team of music historians, musicologists, composers, and computer scientists, Beethoven's vision will come to life. So I think it could be interesting just seeing, obviously, they're going to input a lot of Beethoven esque rules into
Hmm.
the piece and then have real players perform it. So I will keep you posted on how that sounds.
Interesting. I don't know how I would feel if there was a piece of music that I was working on before I died, and
Yeah,
then someone's like, "All right, we're going to use technology to
to
finish it."
bring your music back from the
Yeah.
dead.
Watch it just like it resurrects him, brings him back, and he's like, "No, no, 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 no.
This is all
That's not
wrong.
what I was. This is all wrong. That's not what I was going to do." I
That
mean,
is pretty likely.
it's an interesting idea, but I don't
Mhm.
know how I feel about that. Actually, it'd be interesting to see what other people would do with it. Like if, all right, so here's what he had. Like you do your interpretation of how you would finish it or something, maybe just to see what people would do with their own inspiration of your music, sort of
Right.
thing. But I don't know.
I don't either. I'll let you know.
It's an interesting idea though.
It comes out next week.
There's gonna be a lot of people very upset about it. No, you wouldn't have done that.
The internet will
Yeah.
be outraged. But speaking of AI, this company called Baby Audio has released an AI tape emulation plugin that's designed to capture the invisible nuances of analog circuits. So they spelled tape, T I,
Type.
sorry, TAIP. So
Hmm.
there's AI in the middle of it,
Oh,
which is clever and cheesy at the same time.
oh,
Um,
they're really trying to get people upset.
oh yeah. So it
AI
says
is one of those words that like it can it'll get some conversations going,
it's
and sometimes
polarizing.
yeah.
So this says rather than using traditional DSP, this is built around an AI algorithm that's designed to decipher invisible nuances of analog circuits, and you can recreate the true warmth and behavior of analog tape. So you can add saturation and glue to drums, instruments, and vocals, or drive it hard and use tape as an alternative to a distortion plugin.
Interesting.
So
I think I saw someone maybe it was Dom. I think Dom had a video where he was talking about it. I don't know why, because that name sounds very familiar. I haven't had a chance to check it out. Sounds interesting though.
yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see. Obviously you have to separate the buzzword popularity from like actual features, but I think it'll be interesting to see how plugin developers use artificial intelligence moving forward. Like we did talk about Ozone having the mastering assistant that
Hmm.
listens to your track and shows you, dynamic areas or frequency spectrum areas that you could fix.
Yeah, I've always thought that was really interesting. I mean, like the other day, I was just sitting and I had a random thought of like how computers and all this stuff kind of came to be. Just like, oh, like I'm gonna take these little microchips and make this board that then projects this image. Like, I mean, when I try to think of that kind of stuff, my brain is just like,
Yeah,
you
that's
know,
above your pay grade for
that's
sure.
way above my pay grade. And when I think of plugins that recreate amps or analog hardware, stuff like that, it's just crazy that, people are using all this software to recreate these different things, like how you go about it. And now with people trying to utilize AI with stuff and recreating, I think it's really interesting and definitely the next step forward in technology. It's how can we take what we have and using all this different math and scripting to create all this recreations of hardware gear into the digital world. It's yeah, it blows my mind when I think about it.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it kind of progresses moving forward. Do you watch JHS Pedals YouTube channel?
Mm-mm.
Do you have any JHS pedals? Are you familiar with the brand?
No, no, actually, I don't think I've ever heard of those pedals at all.
Okay, so they're big in like the worship music, like church music arena, as well as like country, and I guess some genres that you're not really playing. uh,
Yeah,
but they
hence
make
most of my guitars look like demonic sculptures from hell. No, I'm just kidding.
right skeletal. Uh, Basically, they have like a large line of pedals, and they're all kind of like in the boutique arena of overdrives and delays and some interesting like tube distortion, stuff like that.
Hmm.
But they have a really great YouTube channel talking about the history of pedals, and they just made a video fairly recently about pedal order,
Hmm.
and this also applies really well to plugin order in an effects chain.
Yeah.
And so they were talking about like, is it important? And we have these premonitions of like standards that we use,
Hmm.
but what actually sounds best. And so their motto from this video is just try it. Like everyone says, okay, put your overdrive before distortion, and like so they switch the overdrive and distortion and play it both ways, just to hear what which one they prefer. And
Hmm.
sometimes it varies song to song. And then so he talks about the fuzz should always be the first thing you plug your guitar into, because it's like a really dirty circuit that hogs a lot of signal.
Mm.
And if you put it at the last part of your signal chain, it just sounds really trashy. So that was kind of interesting. And I don't know if you think about effects chain order when you're mixing, but that's something that I play around with like, reverbs in front of delays or delays in front of reverbs, modulation earlier, later in the chain.
Yeah, I definitely think about it. I feel like I don't think about it as much because I have certain standard moves that I do. Like
Right.
when it comes to first in the chain, usually it'll be like an EQ. Try and like
Totally.
filter out everything first because I've seen a lot of debate as far as like, do you do compressor first and then EQ, or EQ and then compression? But it's like how you EQ something going into a compressor will affect how that compressor can react.
Hmm.
So it's one of those like tomato type things. As far as like reverbs and effects, I don't really think about that too much because I generally use those on effects tracks
Hmm.
and I just feed into them. Well, I'm not really thinking about it too much from a RAM point of view now, but back when you have limited resources, you can't just throw some giant RAM hogging reverb on every single track. Plus, it's kind of pointless. I would do the whole like on a group track or in Cubase, you can have an effects track where you put one black hole reverb or some orchestral reverb like Liquid Sonics or something. And because some of those can get pretty, resource hogging.
Hmm.
So I generally think about it as like someone who has a rack with a bunch of hardware effects, and it's like I'm just feeding into that. That's kind
Yeah.
of how I try to think about it these days. As far as like actual hardware pedals, I definitely used to think about that when like the early days of playing in bands. Of, I used to have a pedal board with like a distortion. I think I had that red whammy pedal. I had a
Nice,
delay.
nice.
I think I might have had a chorus pedal. I had a wah. I had a Steve Vai Bad Horsey wah. I would definitely experiment or think about that kind of stuff then, because where you place your delay can definitely, have an effect, or
Hmm.
where your distortion is. Because I didn't use the distortion on the head that I had back then. It was just kind of this like cheapy Marshall one, but the main distortion was from I think it was a Digitech Metal Master pedal that I
Oh,
had.
baby.
It probably sounds like horse shit these days, but back
It
then
got
I
you
thought,
through.
yeah, back then everyone thought it sounded cool. Like I was like, oh, it sounds pretty heavy. Yeah, I think it almost replicated like an HM2 kind of distortion, just super aggressive and really kind of chuggy. Nowadays, not so much. I mean, I do have a couple pedals that I have. This precision drive one. It's like a little, basically Horizon Devices version of a tube screamer, you know.
Sweet.
So it's pretty cool for people who are wanting to do sort of having a drive into their distortion, because it kind of tightens up the sound. It's like a trick that a lot of people use for just kind of tightening up the distortion, because sometimes the low end can get a little bit tubby. So it kind of focuses it, gives it a little extra gain, just to kind of add a little bit of that extra zing to it.
Some brightness.
Yeah. And then most of the time, any time based effects, I just always ran them through the effects loop. So I didn't really think about it too much as far as where reverbs and delays sit, because I would just throw it through the effects loop, and it's kind of like its own little pathway. And
Sure.
then overdrives and stuff always into the front of the head. I know you definitely have a lot more pedals and like a whole little pedal board. I remember you I think on your YouTube channel you did a video talking about it a while
I
back.
did, yeah, a while back. Nothing's changed on that front. I still have all those pedals, and I run synths through them as well as guitars. And so, yeah, I do distortion first, coming from whatever is being signaled. So the guitar into distortion and overdrive, and then into like modulation, pitch effects. And I don't use a compressor on that board. I'll typically use those as plugins. But then reverb, delay, then reverb. I guess
Using your hardware pedals, have you noticed a specific change in sound by going delay reverb or reverb delay?
yeah. If you do reverb first and then delay, your delays become much more present and like distinct. You can hear the actual delays happening. If you flip that and do delay into reverb, the reverb washes out your delays. So that's sometimes a good thing. Like if I'm making ambiances, I usually prefer doing delay into reverb, and the
Mm,
reverb kind of just spreads it and washes it, but they're less distinct, if that makes sense.
totally. Yeah, that's cool. Using those pedals and stuff in your computer, especially if you're doing like ambiances and stuff, how do you go about routing it? How do you do that?
Typically, if I'm recording those, I will just plug my synth into the pedal board and then plug my pedal board directly into the interface with the DirectBox,
Mm-hmm.
and then record it like that. I'm not typically doing like an effects loop, but I can do that with the interface where you know, plug the output into the input and then output into the input of the box.
Mm-hmm.
But typically, I'm just using it as like an instrument, and playing, turning knobs. That's the fun of getting out of the DAW, is just turning real knobs and
Mm-hmm.
moving faders.
Yeah, that's what I was getting into when I did that video where I was talking about using pedals as plugins, and that
Hmm.
was something different for me, because I got this cool pedal, the Flex Echo, same company as the Precision Drive, because there's a lot of these different modes on it, from like really analog kind of delays, or sort of warbly reverbs and that sort of
Nice.
thing. And I was like, well, that'd be kind of cool to experiment using hardware pedals in the computer. So it's like trying to kind of merge the two. It's definitely an interesting way of working. Sometimes you have to bounce stuff out in real time, just because the way things work, it's not always just going to render out the way you want. So it's a
Sure.
little bit of a different workflow, but it's definitely an interesting way of working. I've definitely wanted to get into experiment thing with hardware stuff for like mixing and mastering, like
Hmm.
using some kind of hardware compressor, running it through and stuff like that. Cause I think it's just when you use plugins all the time, you eventually want to experiment with some different stuff. Like I wonder if bringing in the analog, if it really affects it,
Sure.
but I just can't bring myself to just forking out the cash for that stuff.
They're getting cheaper all the time though, because no one wants them anymore.
Yeah, everyone's just like, I got this plugin that does everything and I could run 1,000 of them on the same
Right.
track. I don't need you no more.
Right.
Yeah, and plus there's a lot of companies that are making clones of some of these really expensive pieces of gear.
Totally.
So you can always get those, replications of like SSL hardware and stuff like that. I
Have you
see that
seen
a lot.
the DIY kits where you build your own, like a Neve clone or something like that?
I want to say yes. Like I've seen where people have like those little, there's like little modular strips where they'll just like boop, boop, boop. It's kind of,
Yeah. Well, it's like Legos for adults, basically. They just send you a box full of parts and you have to solder it all together.
oh, so you actually put the unit together
Yeah.
yourself.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. That's pretty interesting.
It's a fraction of the cost. And you get to learn about your hardware.
Yeah, you just better hope you do it right.
That's part of the fun.
Yeah, that's the thing about me. I get too nervous about that sort of stuff. That's why when we were putting together my computer, I was like, Nathan, can I get your help? Because I never put together a computer, so that kind of stuff makes me nervous.
Sure.
So it's always good first time around. You don't want to connect something to the wrong thing, especially because when you have all these parts, you don't want to mess something up.
They're expensive Legos. Yes.
Yeah, one of the things that I was wanting to talk to you about was sort of your approach for learning new music. Because for me lately, I've been learning some new material for some live shows that we got coming up next year,
Nice.
and I'm always curious to hear other people's perspectives on how they go about learning new music. I know there's so many different ways. Some people can just kind of devour music and in one chunk, but I'm interested to hear your perspective as far as how you go about learning new music, either on guitar or keyboard or that sort of thing.
Yeah, it depends what it is. I would say if it's something melodic, I like to try to be able to sing it. So I'll just have it in my ears when I'm exercising or when I'm going to sleep at night. I'm just constantly playing the track and just getting really familiar with it, almost like you're listening to your favorite musical or your favorite concept album or something, and you know what's coming up next. After I get really familiar with it, I'll try to be able to like hum along or sing along with the music. And your brain's basically memorizing the music through repetition.
Just, yeah.
If it's something fast, I like to throw it into software and slow it down at least 50%. And I will play along at half speed. Those are my two like go-to tips. I would say like those are the two things I use a lot for learning new music is just getting familiar, trying to sing it, and then
like internalizing it
and then
through,
playing it real slow. What about you?
For me, it kind of varies. I mean, for the stuff that I'm playing, it's very like physically demanding stuff on the guitar. It's like no real like room for breathing too much.
Sure.
So a lot of it is just like a lot of different notes and stuff like that. So I feel like for very busy music, I usually what I'll try to do is I'll break it into small little chunks. So I'll be like, all right, like let's get the intro.
Nice.
And then it'll just be learning that once I kind of at least have the gist of all of the notes. Like, all right, I know it. Maybe I can't fully play through it, but I get it. Then I'll move on to the next part. And then usually what I'll try to do is like work from like, beginning, verse into the chorus or something like that. Sometimes if there's more parts that are a little bit more busy or really tough, I'll just focus on that just over and over. Or if there's like a weird part where it's like odd time or it's really like throwing me off every time I know that part's coming up, I'm like, oh God, I'm like dreading it.
Sure.
I'll just take that part and I'll just work on it over and over. Usually I've never done the whole like slowing stuff down and playing along to it. I've never done it that way. The other guitarist in my band, he does that. Like in Guitar Pro, you can slow it down. You can take all the stuff and just slow it down to whatever. You can actually set it up to where it'll go up 1 BPM every time it loops a part.
Nice.
Which is pretty interesting, and I think it could be super helpful. I'm just too lazy to go in and do that. I just do it like the old school hard way and just like just grind it out over and over. I used to,
what are you looking at when you're doing that? Does someone like write these tabs out or
yeah, we
what?
usually tab out all the stuff. So
Okay,
as
nice.
like, as we're working on pre-production for the albums, normally what we do is each person will have like their own Guitar Pro tab where it's just loaded with a bunch of riffs and ideas. And then like for the last album, I would then sort of take everything and kind of put it together and arrange
Okay,
it. And then from there, we then like, just like copy and paste from one tab into what is the actual song.
sure.
And then from there, we just, once it's done, save it off. And then we'll just use that as reference for when it's time to actually learn the stuff, whether we're doing like playthroughs or live now, which has been like like almost 15 years since the band's played live. So it's pretty
Wow.
yeah, pretty nerve-wracking. So yeah, it's a lot of just like grinding out the stuff. So I mean, like I haven't played live since like 2013. So I haven't really just like sat and like jammed out songs for a while.
Yeah.
So it's kind of like forced me to go back and learn tabs, again, which isn't really that hard. It's kind of like riding a bike, really. Like when you
Hmm.
haven't done it, like I'm horrible with notation. Using notation every day or something for me to like really like take the time to do it, because I don't use it that much in my daily work. If I was probably doing like film composing or assisting for composers or doing orchestration and stuff, yeah, you would definitely need to know that kind of stuff. um, but for tabs, yeah, it's generally what we use. And then yeah, I just kind of look at it, play it. All right, cool. I'm very like I don't know if you're like this too, but like very pattern oriented.
Yeah.
I don't know why. I think I've always just kind of developed that. I'm very like visual learner, so like I just try to like either just remember how things look or like how patterns are formed on the guitar, also on the
Your
keyboard.
brain definitely remembers like chunks, right? So
Hmm.
it's just like chunking, little sections. That helps a lot. And then you can kind of string those chunks together.
Yeah, that's usually the way I think about it. It's like learning this chunk and then learning this chunk and then learning the part where those chunks meet.
Yeah.
Because sometimes that could be the thing too, where you're learning a piece of music and you forget like, oh, that part's coming up. And then you got to
Right.
rewind it and you want to get that like smooth transition. And like, because just learning this part and then like different parts, that's part of it, but it's learning how the whole song flows and being able to just like nail it all the way through. I think that's kind of the the real hard part of it, is getting it to be one smooth
So
connection to each.
how many hours a week are you playing Guitar Hero to get to this level?
I don't play Guitar Hero. I'm horrible at Guitar
I
Hero.
thought that was the secret to success.
No, the secret to being good at Guitar Hero is playing Guitar Hero. The secret to playing guitar is playing guitar. It's funny. I've had friends who didn't play guitar but could just completely dominate me in Guitar Hero. And they're like, "But you play guitar." I'm like,
Yeah.
"Yeah, I play guitar, not Guitar Hero. Like you have 5 buttons. I have, I don't even know how
A
many
whole neck.
frets.
Yeah.
Yeah, over 100 or so frets of different notes. Like I don't think about it as like, to me, I'm just playing this like chromatic scale, that sort of thing. It's funny. One of the things I used to do when I was in high school, when I just wasn't paying attention in my classes and I was just like thinking about guitar all day,
Right.
is I would sit with guitar tabs and I would try to learn it without a guitar in my hand.
Oh yeah. Just like visualize it.
Yeah. And I think that's another reason why learning with tabs is fairly easy for me, especially when
Hmm.
I think of the pattern stuff, because I could just sort of imagine it's like when you play guitar enough, you can basically play without looking. Like it's just
Totally.
you've internalized these patterns and scale shapes. And even like if I'm playing certain like inversions of a minor arpeggio, when you have this kind of like half step and whole step shapes, even if you were playing, let's say like a G major scale where you have whole step, whole step, whole step, whole step, half step, whole step, half step, whole step, then like in that same half step, whole step, if you like invert your fingers, now you're doing part of a first inversion minor arpeggio sort of thing. So I would always try to see how these different shapes connect with each other. And just by, I think, doing that kind of stuff too in your practice, it helps when you're learning music too, because you just sort of relate it to everything that you know. And I feel like that's kind of how I've always tried to go about it with everything,
Mm-hmm.
is like, whether you're getting into working out or something, I would always try to relate it to how I practice guitar. I don't know if you used to like make your own little guitar workout schedule. Like I used
Sure.
to do that, like Monday, like I'm going to do the major modes and I'm going to play them with alternate picking. And then I'll work on, arpeggios for
You
15
had you
minutes.
had your fitness routine.
Exactly. Yeah. For my hands.
Nice.
And I used to do that sort of thing. And then like the next day, like, oh, I'm going to do the harmonic minor modes, but I'm going to do it legato. So it's like you're learning scales while you're also practicing a different technique. Or you
Yeah.
can do the same thing with like, oh, I'm going to do this set of modes, but now I'm going to do it like tapping, where it's like hammer on and tap, so kind of doing the whole like killing two birds with one stone sort of thing.
And I assume you guys are not playing with the music on stage, so you're memorizing everything.
No, I've never done that live. And
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. I mean,
you got a lot of music to memorize then. How long does
yeah,
it take you to be able to play a song through without, referring back?
sometimes I can learn a song within like an hour. Sometimes I can learn a song within a couple hours. Sometimes it takes me a while just because maybe some of the parts are just really unfamiliar. So I just need to like sit and grind it out.
Sure.
Like there's times where I've had songs where like I've listened to them so many times that it's just a matter of like learning what the actual notes are. Cause one of the things I used to do before I even got a guitar was I used to listen to it and try to imagine like what they were doing. So if it was like dun 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 dun, I'd be like like kind of sort of air
Just-
guitar it.
You were playing air guitar, yeah.
Yeah, and but then once I actually got a guitar, I can kind of mimic it. I wasn't playing any notes or chords, just kind of like hitting open notes, or
Sure.
So
It's like how drummers, like future drummers, play pots and pans as little kids. It's like
mhm.
it's very similar. It's not the same, but you're practicing for greatness.
Yeah, it's just like playing air drums, or if you're like doing that sort of thing, it's the same thing. You're connecting when your foot lands to when your
Mhm.
right hand goes down, what your other hand is playing on the on the ups or downs of the beat and that sort of thing. I mean, of course, you definitely want to practice on a real kit if you're
Yeah.
really doing it, but a lot of it is very mental. I feel like I can sit and probably practice a song in my head, because I remember hearing this thing, a guitarist, Steve I, was saying, if you can imagine yourself doing something like completely, like if it was really happening, you can do it in real life. And I guess what he used to do was he used to imagine himself, playing with the guitar, like, whipping his arm around and doing all these crazy moves and stuff. And if you ever watch some of how he plays, he does that. He'll just like whip the whammy bar around and like move his hands and do all this crazy stuff. And you just hear all this like wild music coming out of his guitar. And I've thought about that, when, let's say there's like a lick or something that you can't get down. It's like, if you can't even imagine yourself playing it, you're not going to be able to play it, even with
Mm,
you have a guitar in your hands.
sure.
Like it's like you still fumble in your head even when you're trying to imagine it, like if you were really running through it. So it's just more of like connecting the mental with the physical. And so if you are listening to, let's say all the notes to a piece of music, and then you just listen to it, you can, or like mentally practice everything as if you were really playing. Like, I don't know, I mean, that's just kind of what I've always tried to do, because sometimes you can't always have a guitar in your hand. So I used to, even like sometimes when I would be walking around at at work and old jobs, I would just kind of like imagine like playing certain things as if I was playing it, just air guitaring it. And it's still a valid form of practice, I think, if
Yeah.
you're
Composing in your
mentally,
head.
yeah, or just practicing in your head.
Hmm.
And then you go home and it's kind of like, oh, okay, like you're probably like 50% there.
Just got to put your hands on it. Yeah, I think the brain is, the thing you're actually practicing and rehearsing. And so if you're visualizing, 1, 3, 2, 4 kind of exercise, it's pretty easy to actually put pen to paper later.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so I saw a couple things that I wanted to share with you. Do you know who James Clear is?
Never heard the name.
Okay,
What's he about?
nice. So James Clear is a best-selling author. He wrote a book called Atomic Habits,
Hmm.
and you should definitely read it. It's all about habit stacking and basically creating habits that build on top of each other, and just basically creating discipline in your life and managing success. So he wrote something on his newsletter, and it is how to build a career in 7 steps. Number 1, do great work. 2 is share it publicly. 3 is cold email people 2 steps ahead of you. 4 is talk about your work and trade ideas. 5 is host events and meet in person. 6 is become friends. And 7 is rise together.
Nice.
So that is how to build a career in 7 steps. And the one thing, number 3 is what stood out to me: cold email people 2 steps ahead of you. People are really scared to send cold emails because we fear rejection, but cold emails pretty much have set me up so far. Like, I cold emailed Soundiron when I was looking for a job doing music software. I cold emailed all of my music studio internships. We get cold emails from people asking about being demo composers.
Yeah, reviewing products, stuff like that.
Yeah, I mean, the worst, like the most obvious thing that's going to happen is they don't see the email or they ignore it. And then pretty much worst case scenario is they say no to whatever you're asking. And so if you think of it from a law of large numbers or a numbers game situation, the more, cold emails you send and shoot your shot, the better your chances are.
Yeah, that's something I see people talk about, especially on forums or different social media things. Like, how do you go about landing the gig?
Yeah.
I mean, if you're doing that thing where you have like a template and you're just blasting that to everyone's email, that might not be the best way to go.
Well, like everyone recognizes a template email at this point, especially if you don't even add like any personal info about the company you're emailing,
like research you've done as far as what they're about.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, insert name here. You put the wrong, you leave the wrong name that you copy pasted in,
Yeah. I'm sure there's some people out there guilty of that. Yeah. I've always liked to at least try to, like, if you're going to, try to get some composing gig or something, at least do some research on the company, or, hopefully, like, not like, there's no point in just like cold emailing people for the sake of cold emailing people,
just
like
spamming.
Yeah. It's like you're going to get probably the results that you put in.
Exactly. That's a good way to put it.
Which is none.
And then talk about your work and trade ideas. I really liked that because there is kind of a persona of like hide in a cave until you create your masterpiece and then come out and show everyone. And we live in a different age now where it's much more show your work as it's being created. And then when you actually release the finished product, you have fans who have seen you, composing the album or whatever along the entire journey. They're much more willing to buy your product because they've seen all the work that goes into it. And then, just trading ideas is what we're doing here in this podcast, is going back and forth with plugins we like, or effects chains, or books. And so I think, just doing that collaborative work is really important in 2020.
Yeah, showcasing your work is good, documenting the process. That's why we're in this age of vlogging. Everyone's kind of like, so I think some people almost feel like if they're not putting everything on the internet, they're not working hard enough, which there is something to say about some people. And I've seen bands do this, where they make t-shirts and stuff before they even write any music. Like, we got our band name, we got a website, we got all this merch. And it's like, oh, so, where's your album at? Oh, we're still working on it. It's like, I think some people, they get a little too ahead of themselves.
It's the cart before the horse. Yeah.
Yeah. Like, they're trying to do that sort of projection of what a person is supposed to be doing in this day and age of, easy access of content, especially with social media and stuff. Now it's almost like, if you're not showcasing everything, showcasing your work, it's almost like, do you exist?
Do you even exist? Yeah. Well, Facebook and Instagram are down today.
Yeah.
So influencers are hurting
Yeah.
right now.
Yeah. Make that content. And then once it's up, then you can post it.
But going back to cold emails for a second,
Yeah.
another thing I found this week that is not a new idea, but it's an acronym called A.I.D.A. And it is a formula for writing good ad copy, but you can also use this for sending cold emails that don't suck.
Mhm.
So the A.I.D.A formula, you have A stands for attention or awareness, and you are trying to attract the attention of the customer. You need to stand out. I is interest. So you raise the customer interest by demonstrating features, advantages, and benefits of what you are selling.
Mhm.
D is desire. Convince the customer that they want and desire the product or service and it will satisfy their needs. And then A is action. Lead customers toward taking a specific and measurable action. So composing a good email to, let's say you're an intern, you're a wannabe intern, you want to find a music composing internship. So you're looking for a film composer who needs an intern. Okay, you're sending an email. The first thing you want to do is draw attention. You have to get awareness from the composer or from his assistant or whatever. So you need that look, that glance over at you. So how do you get that? You might have like an interesting subject line that makes them click. You might have something recent that they were in, like their latest press release or their latest movie that they just did, something that draws their attention to your email. Then I is interest. So we need to raise the customer interest, in this case, the film composer interest. So how do you draw interest to yourself or to your craft or to your career? And the easiest way to do that is by offering ways that you can help them.
Yes.
So a lot of people send an email asking for a handout. So they say like, how did you do this? I want to borrow your time. Let's meet for coffee. All of these things are fine and good, but if you get 100 of those emails a day, you just end up ignoring all of them, right? So there's no attention or interest there.
How much coffee can you drink in a day? He's like,
so with interest, you are trying to pique the interest of the film composer by saying, here are the things that I can do for you that you need. Okay. So if you say like, I will take out the trash for you and I will, orchestrate this crazy difficult music that you've been putting off. That's interesting, right? So then the next thing is desire. We're trying to convince the customer that they want and desire the product or service and that it will satisfy their needs. So at that point, you can say like, here's the work that I've done so far in my career. Here's where I went to school. Here's anything that basically gives social proof of competence.
Yeah,
so
credits, stuff that you've
means
worked
you
on.
can do the work that you're saying that you can do. And then action. So you want to lead the customer toward taking a specific and measurable action at the end. So the last part of your email needs to be a call to action, and the call to action should be like, call me back or send me an email back or text me if you're interested in what I'm offering.
Yeah, if you'd like to talk more, feel free to reach out or leave some kind of email links to your website or something, phone number, whatever.
Right. So that would be the call to action, and that you want to specifically have just one thing you want them to do. So if you're sending a cold email, you want an email back, okay, or whatever. So I like that. It's very nice and simple, and you can kind of build almost any sale using those 4 letters.
And I also think if you are genuinely interested in trying to work for somebody, you'll put a little bit more care and effort into the email, especially if you really do like this person's work. Let's say it's a composer and you want to assist with doing stem bouncing or even maybe helping them with their social media. I mean, there's a lot of composers who there's a lot of people out there who know, like we were talking about, it's very important to have a presence. So maybe that's the thing they don't want to do. Like, I don't want to go on Twitter. hey,
Right.
maybe I can help manage your social media and stuff. And then also maybe help with something else, like learning how they go about exporting stems or taking out the trash. I mean, I know when back in the day I had a friend who had a studio, and I was kind of getting into wanting to maybe intern at a studio, and
Sure.
he was like, yeah, man, if you're down to help, straighten up, then I'll show you how to mic stuff, take care of a session, setting up sessions and using Pro Tools and stuff like that. Sometimes that's not the most like cool aspect of the job. Like, oh, so what do you do?
Glamorous.
Oh, I go into the studio and I take out trash and I make coffee all day.
I pulled weeds for one of my studio internships.
Yeah. Yeah. But then I don't think that's necessarily, for some people, like, yeah, like, well, where does pulling weeds have to do with, learning the process of being a composer or working in a studio? I think they just want to see that you actually are down to do what needs to be done.
A lot of it
If
is
you have a
just
work ethic,
a lot of it is just realizing that you're running a business and the whole thing is running a business. So you want to make the business look good, right? So you need the weeds in front of the building to not be there. You need the
Yeah.
trash taken out. You need coffee made. And then, after the session's over, you have free reign of the board. You can record something on the piano. You can tune the drums yourself. You can set up mics or put mics away, roll cables. So there's definitely like a back and forth, like a handshake agreement there. But another thing that composers need is good video and audio skills, capturing like specific moments. And so if you can learn another skill to add to your arsenal, that is really helpful. And we call that like a triple threat. Basically, if you're good at editing videos, and you're good at sending emails, and you're good at whatever.
Yeah.
I gotta
Insert new hat to wear.
yeah, and you're good at building websites. Like those three things combined makes you a very valuable asset to a team.
Yeah. If you have a genuine interest in learning stuff, like I feel like, especially at Soundiron, like one of the things that we all have in common is we're very like autodactic personalities.
Sure.
It's like, if, even before I ever had the opportunity to work for Soundiron, I was, videoing myself, editing my own videos, learning mixing and all this stuff, and I wasn't getting paid for it. I just had genuine interest.
Right.
If you have like genuine interest in things, like I always knew I wanted to work in like a music related field. Of course, I play guitar, that's like my main thing, but I just wanted to be somehow involved in the music industry in some way. So that was it's a very broad umbrella. So many different places you can do. You can get a job working in a warehouse that sells Yamaha speakers, like, yeah, you're still involved in some way, but like but still in a more like creative, So I personally just tried to learn different interests of mine. And I think if you do that and you diversify yourself, like you were saying, like doing video, but some people, they're like, well, that has nothing to do with music. But in this day and age, it's definitely important, especially when
you
it
got to
comes
make
to
TikToks.
yeah, got to get on TikTok, you got to film. I mean, it's crazy what you can get away with a phone. So there's really no excuse as far as, oh, well, I don't have a nice DSLR camera. Like before, like for anyone who doesn't know, before I started working for Soundiron, all my videos on my YouTube were shot with my iPhone. I had my iPhone and this little LED light.
Legendary.
And a lav mic that I had connected into my phone that was like a 50-foot lav mic. So there's no excuse to say that you don't have time or you don't have the right equipment. I mean, it's like, the stuff I have in here now, and I've seen
didn't start with that.
Exactly. I've seen other composers or musicians who have these like really big and, way, you look at Hans Zimmer's studio and you're just like, what?
Yeah, I just watched Christian Henson's new studio tour 2021, and that was the first thing he said was, "You don't need all this stuff that I have." He's like, "I have a Bricasti reverb. You don't need this," and like I don't use it on everything. So
Yeah,
He has a
you always got
ton
to
of
have that
gear.
disclaimer. Yeah, and I think that's an important thing to mention because it could be very discouraging for up and coming people who want to get into doing this. Like before I started with any of this, I was just like, okay, I knew I wanted to get into doing like home studio stuff and have a
Yeah.
little setup. I got an iMac and an interface, and then a friend of mine gave me a copy of Logic Pro 9, and that was enough to get me started. And then
I
from
had
there,
the
it was
cheese
just
grater Mac.
oh yeah. No, I had just had the straight up iMac, super basic, but I mean, you can cut your teeth on anything. You can get Reaper and a laptop and just start learning how to record. Cause then from there, it's just like, that's where the research comes in. And you have to have a genuine interest in learning this stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like I would be working, at a warehouse, and on my lunch break, I would go in, we had computers, and I would just be watching YouTube videos on like EQing a kick drum. And it wasn't, no one was telling me, hey, you need to learn how to EQ a kick drum. I just had genuine interest. And if you're that kind of personality where you just like to learn new things
Sure.
and try new stuff, like the way I see it is like the way I approached, sort of, I guess, trying to do things in a field that you enjoy is don't limit yourself to one thing. I mean, it's good to have sort of like a, like a tier 1, tier 2, tier 3 of interest. Of course you're going to have like, yeah, I would love to be doing this, but if I could do this, it could maybe down the road you can get into doing that tier 1 of stuff that you really want to do as your career. But I always use the analogy of just like throwing out multiple fishing reels.
Nice.
Like you're bound to catch a fish on one of them. If you
Sure.
just have
It's
one,
a
you're
matter
just
of
kind of,
time.
yeah. Or maybe, it might lend to other possibilities or being able to do different things. Cause I think it's good to have multiple skill sets or interests, whether it's video and stuff.
One of the internships I had, the composer said 50% of my job is actually composing music, and the other 50% is looking up trying to find the next gig. And this was a
Mhm.
successful composer. Like, not this was not someone who was grinding. This was someone who like what had big Hollywood gigs. And
Mhm.
he said, you think you get into this to write music, and what you actually do is sit in meetings with directors and, work on taxes and look for the next gig, or have
Mhm.
your agent look for the next gig. And
Yeah.
so that is something to keep in mind, is like you are approaching it looking to do one thing, and no job is really doing one thing and only one thing. So
Mhm.
it really helps to have as many soft skills and hard skills as you can possibly acquire, and you'll be a more
Valued asset, I think.
yeah, you'll be a more valuable asset to a team.
Like other jobs I've been at where you have people that are like, that's not my job. And there is a degree of, separation. Like you need to, if you have a job, like that's your thing, but not being opposed to learning some new thing that's like, oh, like going in and being able to do something on the website, or oh, I got to make this change, like that kind of stuff it's good to know. And it just
Mm-hmm.
not only makes you a more valuable team member, but it's like if you have something that you care about, you don't really think of it as like, it's like, if you're working at McDonald's and you're like, I'm normally doing this thing, and someone says, hey, go out and do this. You're like, well, that's not my job, because it's like you probably don't really care about it. But, I think when you have something that you do care about, or even if it's like a job you're aspiring to get, being able to do the legwork as if when that time comes, you're ready for it. It's like what did they say? Luck is preparation meeting opportunity. Like
Right.
I've always thought that's super true because that's exactly what it is. Like if you're just sitting around saying, I want to score the next Marvel movie, but you just don't work on composing or like everything that goes into that job, dealing with score sheets and, scoring to picture. If you're just like, oh, I just like write a bunch of, action music, but you're like, yeah, I could do the next Avengers. And then that gig comes, all right, here you go, boom. And then you get swamped by all this stuff. And you're just like, whoa, I wasn't ready for that. Like,
Yeah. No preparation,
yeah.
no opportunity.
Yeah. And I think when you are genuinely interested in something, you just do it basically. You just,
Yeah, a big part is also founder, like having a founder mentality. And
mhm.
so if you think of yourself as the founder or the owner of a company or a brand, you are more likely to do whatever it takes to get the mission accomplished. And
Mhm.
so having a founder mentality where you take ownership for the trash getting taken out, or you take ownership for the burgers getting flipped, or whatever it is, that really sets you up for success in almost any field.
And then also going back to the other thing that you mentioned in that list was becoming friends. I feel one thing that you should genuinely do is just make friends with people.
Right. That is something that is funny. So you get told to network, right? And then everyone's
Yeah.
like, ooh, networking's gross. It's actually, if you stop using the word networking, it becomes a lot easier because you're just gaining friendships that have synergy. You hit up your director friend about the new indie film that he just started work on and say, like, hey, if you need, someone to hold the lights or whatever, I'm interested. Or if you need some temp music, I can compose it for you. That's the kind of thing where you find a hole and fill it. And becoming friends with people who are doing creative work basically ends with you getting jobs in a creative field.
Going back to, like, think about it when you're in high school or just in your life, like, you don't think about, like, I need a network. You just meet people, or
Right.
you meet lots of people, but then there's some people that you really click with, maybe like, oh, like, you're into music, I like music too, and then you just kind of become friends,
And then you're
you
in a
know
band.
yeah, exactly. Like, I've had opportunities, doing work for composers, just out of just becoming friends with them, or having genuine interests, or similar backgrounds or something like that, doing stuff in metal or something. um and then you just kind of become friends with people just out of having a cool conversation.
Yeah.
Like, if you're that guy who just, like, shows up and starts passing your business card to everyone,
Business card, right.
you don't want to be that guy who's like, oh, stay away from that. Everyone's just hanging out, maybe having some drinks or something. You don't want to be that punisher that just goes up to everybody and is like, hey, I am this, I need you to hire me for this. Like,
Right.
people get that all the time.
I did hit up Junkie XL like that at NAM a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm just kidding.
He's like, you and everyone else, buddy. No, but yeah, just, like, be cool with people, like, because then when people talk about you, like, oh yeah, I remember, I met him, he's cool, or we had
Seems like a nice guy. Yeah, it's very, very much not about handouts. Like, you don't want to be walking into a place with your hat in your hand and saying, like, hey, I'm desperate for a job and I'm looking for work as a film composer, because you and everyone else are
yeah,
looking
get in
for
line,
work.
man, because everyone else is trying to find work too, and that's the thing. But everyone also, like, has their own specialties, and I think that's something that people should definitely focus on more, especially when it comes to music, or trying to stand out. Like, people say, be the best version of yourself, don't try to be a copy, sort of thing. And it's like, and I know that's something I've talked with you about, like, having your own strengths. Like,
Sure.
for me, it's not playing keyboard, like, that's not my thing. So it's like, okay, well, if this is my weakness, focusing on your strengths, and that sort of thing. Not to say that you shouldn't work on things that you're weak at, but focus on the things that make you unique.
Yeah, you can set up the game to play to your strengths.
Yeah. And also going back to the thing that we were talking about, like, I think Gary Vee has a book where it's called, like, Jab Jab Punch or something like that, where it's like,
Yeah, I know what you mean.
yeah,
Jab jab right hook, I think.
yeah, something like that. And think about that when it comes to the gross term of networking. It's like, don't just right out the bat, hey, what's up, man, how you doing? So, do you need do you need this,
Sure.
or like, hey, I need a job. Did you, it's like, that doesn't always work. And most of the time, if you do that, you're probably going to get the same sort of response. Like you said, putting yourself out there in the sense of how can you help somebody? Because that's really what it comes down to. It's like, how can I help you because I want to learn, or that sort of thing. So the whole, like, going back to the whole jab jab right hook sort of thing, it's like, don't just come right out of the gate and just start punishing people. Just be cool, have genuine conversations, because, like, that's the stuff that people remember. You're like, oh, like, oh yeah, I remember him, we were talking about fishing for an hour and a half.
Right.
Or
we're both from Boston.
Yeah, we always go to this one coffee shop, and, like, for some reason they knew about it, and that's the stuff that I think people remember. And then if down the road they hear, oh, he actually he's a drummer. Oh, actually, I need some drumming on this thing that I'm working on. Would you be down to do it? And because you have that genuine friend connection, that could lead into something that maybe you never even expected, just from just being a cool person. And and you
Yeah.
happen to do this.
People hire their friends.
A lot of times, like you said, you didn't get the gig always because you're the best person for the job. It's just because, hey,
They want to work with you.
Exactly.
So work on being a cool person instead of passing your business card around. Nice.
Yeah. But keep them in your back pocket because sometimes people ask for it.
No, burn them.
Yeah, burn them all.
So my recommendation for this week is a documentary on Netflix called Count Me In. And it is a drummer documentary. It interviews a bunch of drummers. The drummer for Iron Maiden, he's like an old British man.
Nice.
Charlie Watts. They talk about a ton of drummers and basically like drum history from the 50s where, jazz was prevalent into the British, invasion, and how, playing straight hi-hat stuff was like very foreign. And then just like this sweeping wave of music that came with all of that, and the history over the past 70 years of rock and roll, specifically rock drumming. And it was really cool. One of the parts, the drummer for Foo Fighter was saying that he was in like 4th grade, and one of his friends sat him down on a drum set, and he was like, yeah, so you start with the hi-hat and you just count to 4 over and over again with the hi-hat, and then try to put the kick on 1, and he puts the kick on 1, and then the snare on 3, and he's just like does it really easily. And the guy just looks at him, he's like, you're a drummer. And he's like basically a lightning bolt hit me at that point in time where my life was never going to be the same, because drums just came so naturally to me. And he said by the time 5th, 6th grade rolled around, if you're not like the funniest one or the best looking one or the smartest one, you need something to basically like wrap your identity around. And so that for me, that was drums, and drums became like my armor. And I felt that like so strongly from guitar, because that was around the same time that I found guitar, and guitar just like became my identity as a middle schooler, where it's just like, I'm a guitarist and that's all I do is just play guitar.
Oh, you started playing in middle school?
Yeah. 12 years old.
Dang. I didn't start playing until I was probably like into sophomore year of high school. Yeah. It's funny because, there are a lot of musicians who have dealt with like bullying or things like that. And I was definitely no stranger to that. So I think like when I found guitar, it was kind of like my thing to kind of hide away in. And I remember the first time we convinced my music teacher to let us play Crazy Train in the steel band.
Nice.
So we were playing in front of the whole school. People would always, see me walking around or whatever, with a guitar case. And then I remember after that, all these people were just like, whoa, you play guitar? Like it was like this thing. And that was like, oh, you're that guy with the long hair and you play guitar. Like, oh, it was, that was cool or whatever. But it's funny how, like that kind of becomes your thing. Or I think some people do that with music. It's kind of like what they listen to becomes their identity, which I don't.
Yeah, it's ingrained in you.
It's a very high school, middle school mentality. Like
Sure.
Like you get some people that are like, I'm a this.
Right.
I'm a that, but yeah, that's cool. I got to check that out. I think
Count Me In. It's really good. It just came out in August. And it's like, I think it's just a Netflix original. It didn't make like a big splash when it came out, but it was a really fun watch. It's only, like 90 minutes. But I learned about some drummers I didn't know about. And they just gave like a great overview of rock drumming.
That's cool. Yeah, the thing I want to recommend today is something that I've been using for a while. I know I was talking with you about it. It's a Asana.
Oh yeah, Asana.
Yeah, it's a really cool way of structuring your day. You could do everything from having like to-do lists, structuring stuff on the calendar, having lists. It's I know you've mentioned that you like having a to-do list and then checking it off and clicking the little checkpoint and seeing it disappear, and just
gotta get that dopamine, man.
Yeah, like just like it's done. So it's a great way of organization for any of you out there who are looking for a way to sort of structure your day and lay things out, especially for composers or whether you have your own business, that sort of thing. You know, it's definitely a great way of organization. There's plenty of other ones like that, but that's what I've been using. It's pretty cool, especially for, you know, doing social media stuff or
So
having to-do lists.
do you input a bunch of tasks at the beginning of the week for the whole week, or do you like start the day with a bunch of like tasks that you type in for the day, or how do you do it?
Sometimes what I'll do is whenever something comes up that needs to be done, and if let's say I'm not necessarily handling it that moment, kind of like what we were talking about before, like I don't want to get too hung up on like little small things that can kind of eat up time. So what I'll do is what I used to do is actually I used to have, or I still do. It's like a little like a notepad. Sometimes I'll do this if I just like quickly just want to write something down.
Sure.
Sometimes I'll just go in. I'll have Asana on like a separate window, and I'll just, you know, have a to-do list, and I'll just drop it in there real quick. And then what's cool is in there you can rearrange it, so you can set it to like, you know, highest priority, lowest priority. Like, you know, I have videos that I'm planning on doing down the road, certain Soundiron sessions that I have planned for composing in certain styles. So it's just more of like a place to drop either things that I want to do or things that I need to do.
Yeah.
Sometimes I'll do it for like a day-to-day thing, or mainly what I like to use it for is like a things to do. I'll arrange it in priority, and then there's also a calendar. So if I'm like doing certain social media posts, I can be like, oh, you know, I know on this past day I posted about this.
Nice.
So it's a good way of not overstepping and posting the same stuff all the time, or just being structured. And there's a lot of cool things you can do with it as far as structuring and scheduling your day or blocking out time. So it's pretty cool, super useful for anyone who's, you know, trying to find some other method of staying organized.
Nice. I use something similar called Todoist, and I have a app on my phone, and I have the desktop, or it's the web app, and I have a whole list of Soundiron stuff, and then I'll plug in like anything during the day that I'm thinking of. I'll just add it to that list, and I can also add it from my phone if I'm like, you know, remote or mobile, and I'm like, oh, I got to do that. You know, I can set like do this later today, and so that definitely helps me keep things moving. The last thing I'll recommend is Bent Side Spin It. It is the new library that we just dropped. It's a vintage keys. It is a predecessor to the harpsichord and the pianoforte. It is a 17th century Italian instrument that spread through Europe. And I made a track using it almost like a clavinet kind of sound, kind of funky, fun, four on the floor style. So you should check out my composing video, and you should get Bent Side Spin It.
And it's on sale now.
On sale now, $19.
Yeah, you can't beat it. That's it for today. I want to thank you guys all for checking out the podcast. Make sure to follow us on you could listen to the podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and any other podcast platform that you can think of. So make sure to subscribe so you can get all the different podcasts as they're posted. And yeah, thank you all for listening. Nice chatting, Nathan.
Absolutely. Talk to you next week. Peace.
We will be back next week. Adios.